All right. Welcome to another interview to Orthodox Traditionalist Publications. I'm here with my friend Evan Stern. He's one of our new minted GOC members down at South Carolina at our parish in St. Florette. It's good to be with you today.
Hey, Subdeacon. How are you?
Good. It's good. I'm glad to finally be here with you. I'm glad we got to chat.
Yeah. It's been quite a journey to get here. So
I'm trying to really. So I know there's a lot of people in the GOC, or a lot of people in ROCOR-MP, particularly, and some of the other new calendars jurisdictions. They're really interested. They've been reading a lot of the stuff that the GOC has been putting out in the books that we've been writing, and they're interested. And a lot of them are on the fence. And I figured it'd be a good opportunity to let someone who's crossed over that side of the fence and seen that the grass is in fact greener, to let them hear your story.
sure. Yeah. You definitely played a role. I mean, they sell your books at the bookstore in Jordanville, which is strange to me, but
Yeah.
that was certainly helpful in this in my path. But my wife and I, we have two small children, and we spent, I think, about 5 years in the ROCOR-MP. So prior to that, we were, I don't know, vaguely New Age in our early 20s, and came back to our faith and got really serious about Christianity. And we had initially returned to the Episcopal Church, which is just what we knew. And you can kind of imagine how that went. That was a rocky, it was not not the church that I had known when I left it.
Yeah.
And so without getting too into the weeds there, we ended up being conservative Anglicans for about 7 years. And through that process, so we were in the ACNA, we were with the GAFCON bishops, if you know anything about this.
No, I'm blind on Protestantism almost.
Gotcha. Yeah. So in Anglicanism, when they began ordaining women in the 1970s, large factions, it's kind of like the rapprochement with Moscow, large factions of the Anglican Church broke away, and some of them remained in communion with Canterbury, and some of them formed their own synods. And I had kind of gotten a wild idea that I might be some kind of cleric in the Anglican Church. And so I started taking some seminary classes. And through doing that, I started reading a lot of patristic voices, a lot of the church fathers. And that brought me to the ecclesiology of the church, which, as an Anglican, it's probably the most similar in polity to the Orthodox Church. They have bishops and deacons and priests. But ecclesiology is not really something it's not a topic that would come up at a church picnic. Right. So a lot of this stuff was brand new to me. And I'm reading all these fathers of the church about how the ecclesiology has been bestowed upon the church by God and the revelatory nature of it. And that really set a fire under me to re-examine where I was and how I had arrived there and where we should be headed. And I think it was probably 10 years ago that I started reading a lot of Orthodox apologetics, Orthodox theology. And my wife and I just kind of dipped our toes in the water, so to speak, for some time. But it was, it's a jarring move from Protestantism to Orthodoxy.
Yeah.
It's a huge leap. So it's funny, what ended up finally pushing us out of Anglicanism was the patristic voice in comparison to, or in contrast to, the way that the polity of our synod was run. So we were under some African bishops who were dissenting voices to the Archbishop of Canterbury, but they were still in technical communion with them. And so all those years ago, when we fled Anglicanism, the thing that pushed us out was this schizophrenic ecclesiology of tangential communion. Right? I want to be separated from that bishop because I think they're a heretic. And yet, here I am under a separate synod, but still tangentially in communion with this heresiarch that I want to get away from. And so that was the final move for us. And we we visited a couple different jurisdictional parishes and settled in a ROCOR-MP parish. And it was a great experience. Obviously, you're immersed in the richness of the liturgy, and you're learning all of this new theology. We had some apprehension about joining ourselves to the Moscow Church at the outset of it. And the priest that ended up baptizing us and catechizing us, he had been in the ROCOR for, I think, 20 years, 25 years, pre-rapprochement. And he said a lot of things that assuaged our concerns about being in alignment with Moscow, that over time, all of that stuff just completely fell apart. So through our contact with bishops and conferences and just staying abreast of the happenings in the church, a lot of that stuff started falling apart. I think when we came to the ROCOR-MP, there, the fight within mindset is kind of that's the banner everybody rallies behind, and you're made to feel like you have some kind of momentum as the laity, that you can affect a change in the synod, and that somehow that change would even reach all the way across the ocean to Moscow. And I can tell you certainly that's not the truth as we knew it in the ROCOR-MP. Yeah.
Where did you come from? Which parish were you coming through when you received into ROCOR-MP?
So we were received into a small parish in Fletcher, North Carolina, which is basically a little satellite of Asheville. Really interesting parish. A lot of I don't know if you know Asheville at all.
I've never been out there, no.
It's kind of like the New Age capital of the East Coast. So all kinds of people funnel into that parish, and it's a really interesting place.
So you were there. So how long were you at Fletcher for?
I think we were at Fletcher for 4 years.
4 years?
Three and a half.
How long now?
This is our, well, if you count the years of nominal orthodoxy, this will be our 6th year.
So you've made it over the 5-year hump. So basically, most people don't make it past 5 years.
Is that true?
Yeah, it's more. Most people, they kind of fall away after 5 years. So you made it over it. So you're pretty established. I'd say you've gotten your way. So what was your experience in ROCOR-MP at the time when you first came? I know you're eventually. What grew you to understand what the Moscow Patriarchate became?
So when we came into the ROCOR-MP, I think we fell in love with the saints of ROCOR. You read about St. John Maximovich, you read about St. Philaret, you read about, even people who are not formally canonized by the church. These are just lions of Christianity. These people, they don't make them like that, right?
Yeah, anymore. Not anymore.
Reading the lives of these people, their travels through Mongolia and China, and their lives in exile as bishops, really inspiring. And to feel like you're a part of that is very meaningful. But it's kind of a repeat experience of leaving Anglicanism, that the more that you glean, right? Because all those people left a really hefty chunk of garment for us to cling to. Yeah. And the more that you glean from it, the greater the chasm between you and them appears before you. And that was our experience, is that the more that we read and the more contact that we had with the ROCOR-MP, the harder it was to justify remaining there. The things that we found, the things that we liked about the ROCOR-MP were I think the things that those saints and bishops left behind, right? That's what people fall in love with when they come into the ROCOR-MP. The traditional liturgy, all of the things that are beautiful and meaningful there, I think unfortunately are relics of the past. The ROCOR-MP is kind of a museum in that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it doesn't. ROCOR, it doesn't change very much externally. Definitely doesn't change whatsoever.
Yeah, externally is the key word, right?
Mhm.
So it was kind of like lifting up a veneer on a piece of furniture, and then you
Yeah.
find the inside is just completely rotten.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, yeah. So, like for instance, I think when we read about Saint John Maximovich, and especially about his vision of sobernost and how the church is governed, and that delicate balance between the laity and the clerical class, um, couldn't be farther from what we experienced in the ROCOR-MP of today.
Hmm.
So we just found a lot of blind clericalism. That seems to be the rule of law in the ROCOR-MP. Um, the Orthodox perspective, in my mind, is that a bishop is deserving of that honor and style because he is a progenitor of the truth, right? He rightly divides the word of thy truth. And if they forsake those things, or if they step outside of those borders, then it's all meaningless. All of those things fall away from them.
Yeah.
But the ROCOR-MP has kind of absorbed this. It's a new world Russian clericalism, a very top-down hierarchical model that I think is foreign to what is truly Orthodox, what's really of the church.
Mhm.
Anything that a bishop says, anything that a priest says, that becomes the gospel, right? It
Mhm.
doesn't matter if it contradicts the gospel or if it's contrary to what's already been established by the saints who came before us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
That's
we couldn't live in that.
so. When did you start seeing those? So you'd been there, you'd been at that parish for 4 years. When did you start? What was the when did the scale start to fall? What do you think was when did you start seeing the cracks with Moscow? What was the
Hmm.
driver?
If I had to pick a moment where it began to crumble, so ROCOR is really good at building a brand, a cachet around those old ROCOR saints and just the old ROCOR in general.
Mm.
And that was the brand of our parish, especially in North Carolina. So a lot of the things that we would use as touchstones were things like the 1983 anathema against ecumenism,
Mhm.
or just that general anti-ecumenist, very traditionalist Orthodox worldview.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until we started having contact with hierarchs and professors from Jordanville that some rifts started appearing between the brand and then the reality and practice.
Mhm.
So I think the first time that occurred, um, Bishop Gabriel of Canada, Archbishop Gabriel of Canada, came to visit our parish. And I had recently seen, as many people have, his recorded deposition video, which I'm sure you've seen.
Famous.
Yeah,
So yeah.
famous.
So if people don't know, yeah. Well, for those who are in the know, so for those people who don't know, there's if you go on YouTube and you look up, what should they look up? Bishop Gabriel deposition, actually, right?
Hmm.
I think if you look up that, or and then there's Metropolitan Laris. There's videos where he's getting grilled by an attorney about this 2007 union, and you can go look it up. So yeah, you were
Yeah.
saying.
Yeah, so he had come to visit our parish, and this was in the midst of a lot of ecumenical activity from the ROCOR-MP that we are part and parcel, or we're part and parcel to, as ROCOR-MP members. And I'm trying to make sense of this. And then in that process, I'd seen that deposition video. And so here I am confronted with Archbishop Gabriel, and a perfect opportunity to ask him myself. And I did.
Mhm.
So I followed him out to the parking lot. I said, Vladika, I have a question. Can I ask you a question? And I asked him, a lot of people, young people in the church, this deposition video has resurfaced, and we're confused by it because the Moscow Patriarchate is involved in all these ecumenist activities. And point blank, is the 1983 anathema null and void, or is it an enforceable law of the church? Which one is it? And he said, well, we still read it aloud on Sunday of Orthodoxy.
Mhm.
And I said, okay. So is it valid or is it null and void? And he shrugged and he said, it's hard to say. And that hit me like a lightning bolt. Right? How could it be hard to say if something is anathematized or not?
Mhm.
It seems like a pretty clear cut. Right. So I was pretty unhappy with that.
Mhm.
And a few months later, he visited another parish, and we went there for a hierarchical liturgy. And I got the chance to speak with him again. And I brought up the same topic, and I said, Vladika, the Moscow Patriarchate, they're erecting statues to Sergius, and they're debilitating martyr saints and all these horrible things.
Yeah.
And we talked back and forth, and then he said, here is what I will say. Is sergianism alive and well in the Moscow Patriarchate? Yes. Is the Moscow Patriarchate ecumenist? Also, yes. Anyway, I'm going to get lunch. And he left.
Wow.
That's his verbatim testimony.
I mean,
Um,
have a good lunch, Ladika. Yes.
yeah. And he didn't, to be fair to him, he didn't offer a word of support or of condemnation. It was just presented as an ambivalent truth.
Yeah.
But this made me and my wife very uncomfortable, because now we're again revisiting this issue of tangential communion,
Mhm.
which we thought we had escaped leaving Anglicanism, and we find ourselves in the same sort of schizophrenic ecclesiology that we just can't make sense of. And so we talked and prayed, and we could expound and bloviate academically about this stuff, but it's simple. If something is confusing, then we know who the author of it is, right?
Yep.
And this was very confusing. So some months went by, and I think we just tried to put it out of mind for a while, put it on the back burner.
Mhm.
And we went to see Father Deacon Andrei Sarev speak at another parish, and he gave a presentation. And the presentation, for people who don't know, Father Deacon Andrei is he's like the preeminent canon lawyer of the ROCOR-MP. So in theory, if you have questions about canonicity or ecclesiology, he would be the person that you would reach out to get hard answers to those questions.
Mhm.
And he gave a presentation, and the premise was that the 20th century globally, its primary export or its cultural imprint was ideology. And he argued the case that the ROCOR was not immune to this, and in fact participated equally in the manufacture of ideology. And then among those ideologies, he included things like Tsarism, monarchical traditionalism, just that general strain of thought in the ROCOR. And so after we listened to his lecture, and afterwards I approached him and I said something along the lines of, how can we as lay people, how do we find the line between what's revelatory in nature and what's ideological? Because it seems like if we're reading traditional Orthodox theology, then we find this idea that there's a monarchical superstructure, like it's an ontological truth. It's present in everything, right? It's present in the animal kingdom, in the Trinity, in everything. And of course, God appoints and edifies monarchs the whole way through the canon, from the Old Testament to the New Testament. And so how do we tell what's revelatory and what's not? And he answered pretty simply, just that we're in a modern era and we need to modernize the church, and that this is the best way to reach people. And that argument to us sounded very much like a Vatican II rebranding of the church, right? A
Yeah.
total separation of like a revelation from God into a pragmatic church. And that is exactly what we had fled. We don't want pragmatism, right? We want the revelation from God himself. So a lot of those things just kept occurring, and they were just very confusing.
Mm-hmm.
And to sort of add some context, we had been aware of the old calendarists before we joined ourselves to the MP. And the MP, that issue came up repeatedly. So we happened to have found ourselves baptized by a priest who had actually departed the ROCOR at the rapprochement. And he was made a deacon by Metropolitan Agafongel and then was later ordained a priest back in the ROCOR-MP by Hilarion.
Mm-hmm.
So he had kind of lived under both, and he had a sympathetic view of the old calendarists. But then we met many other ROCOR priests who had a very harsh view of old calendarism. Mm-hmm. And so, again, we're butting up against this very disparate ecclesiology. One priest under the same bishop will tell us that they're graceless, they're schismatics, they're hellbound, there's no Christ upon their altar. And then another priest will tell us that they're simply walled off in a canonical fashion and we can't commune with them because of our disagreements. Mm-hmm. And we tried to sort that out through so many different clerics and bishops, and we just could never get a straight answer about which one were true. But in the process of that, we did hear we heard a lot of things about the GOC that we've now found out were completely untrue, right? So the charges levied against the GOC by many clerics in the ROCOR-MP were always the same. The GOCK is a haven for clerics fleeing ecclesiological justice. The GOC is primarily comprised of parishes that exist in strip malls and basements, that their bishops live in Section 8 housing and, Uber everywhere.
Yeah.
So imagine our surprise. We come into the GOC and there are thriving parishes filled with people. We were told that the people who are in the GOC were all like fanatical, crazy ROCOR converts that left in some kind of purity spiral. Most of the people that we've met thus far are cradle Orthodox people.
Yeah, that's
as far as the ecclesiastical justice claims. I don't know. Someone will have to send me a list of names, because from what I can tell, the GOCK is very particular about who they ordain.
Metropolitan Demetrius is very, very particular about who he ordains. Yeah. Most of our, especially here in America, most of our priests are, I'd say a good majority of them were old ROCOR and just didn't want to go into communion with the Moscow Patriarchate. Simple as that.
Yeah.
I know. And it's funny because they're like, oh, the fleeing justice thing. I was like, well, if they're fleeing justice, why did Metropolitan Laurus write them canonical releases? So why do we have, we have a father out in Oklahoma, father up in upstate New York. It's like they're, waving around. We have a canonical release from Metropolitan Laurus. So
yeah, and a lot of those things were cleared up. For instance, until very recently, I was not aware that ROCOR declared the GOC as a sister church as recently as the 2000s.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That was extremely shocking to us, because we had heard all these like real antipathy from ROCOR-MP clerics about these old calendarist schismatics. And then you discover all these synodal documents that are signed by the entire synod, and it crumbles on the face of it. It makes no sense. Mm-hmm. So anyway, through that journey, we, especially the priest who baptized us, we were in constant contact about our struggle and these ecclesiological uncertainties that we just couldn't seem to sort out. And in the midst of that, one day, Patriarch Kirill and his synod released a document where they declared the war in Ukraine a holy war. I'm sure you've seen that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so we asked our parish priest about this, and he said, well, I think he's a heretic. I think we can comfortably say he's a heretic.
Okay.
Another lightning bolt straight to my heart, right? How can we be in communion with a heretic? Mm-hmm. Our patriarch is a heretic. And the answer that I got was very interesting, because I think this will resonate with a lot of people in the ROCOR. Mm-hmm. The gist of it was, we know that our parish is solid, right? We're doing things the right way here. And we know that me, the priest, I'm not a heretic. And we know that our bishop in New York is not a heretic. And so we're not heretics. And that just flew in the face of everything that I knew about Orthodox ecclesiology and how it really works. That I can't be in communion with a patriarch who's a heretic and not be a heretic, especially if I know that he's a heretic. Right? There's not even a shred of culpable ignorance here, or of unculpable ignorance.
That's key right there.
Yeah. So now I'm knowingly participating in a church that's anyway. That was the final straw for us that drove the wedge. But that's like a really ROCOR-MP standard is, this guy in Russia, he might be a heretic, but you know that your priest is solid. So it's all good.
Did you ever, it's growing a lot of that's coming from the new calendar. It's this Orthodox Presbyterianism where it's like, it's a church run by the bishops and these elders. That's, as long as your elder's fine, as long as your priest is fine, it doesn't matter what the bishops say. It's like, we're a hierarchical church. The bishop signs the antimons that gives your priest license to celebrate liturgy. Without that, he's not celebrating liturgy. He's only a representative of the bishop. So what your bishop believes, you believe.
Yeah. And then, that stuff, all the ecclesiological stuff, parallel to that, there was also the praxeological problem. So ROCOR to us was just a dead church.
Yeah.
There were no good works springing forth from it. Especially coming from a Protestant background, that was something that we were very accustomed to, right? You devote your time and your body and your money and your energy to some worthy cause, someone less fortunate, orphans, widows, right? These are just basic Christian tenets. And we just couldn't find that occurring anywhere in the ROCOR-MP. And it seemed like when we brought it up or we tried to create some such initiative, we were scoffed at. So coming over to the GOCK, again, completely opposite experience. There's very active and lively outreach. There are people who really do take sort of an activist disposition towards the poor or towards, everyone has their own niche cause, but real, like, people living Christian lives. And it seemed like the ROCOR has replaced that, and they satiate people with like this amalgam of right-wing republicanism and culture war theology.
Yeah.
And we lived through a lot of that. We came into the church right before the COVID pandemic. So that became like a star theme of the ROCOR. Everyone wanted to talk about vaccines and, who was not doing communion right and all those things. To me, and maybe this is because I lived in a church life prior to being Orthodox, that all seemed very inconsequential. I feel like these things will pass away in time. A few years from now, no one's even going to remember these things. But that was like the lifeblood of the church for a while.
Yeah.
So much that I remember a parish priest asking me to help him film a commercial about the COVID vaccine to promote the parish.
Wow.
Really strange stuff.
Yeah, that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
That's definitely a weird one. So when you started seeing all these things, I know at first you were apprehensive and the GOC was still like the boogeyman. So what actually got you over that real, like the ick factor? You're like, oh no, I can't go there. What was the catalyst that got you over that hill?
The ick factor is funny.
Yeah.
So a couple years ago, I think 2 years ago, we had a parish priest who he wasn't outright refusing to do crowning ceremonies, but he just wasn't performing them. He'd always have a convenient excuse why he couldn't participate. And there were all these people in the parish who had secular marriages, but who hadn't been crowned. And when you approach this priest, he would usually say, well, I've got this prayer that I can just read over you and it kind of regularizes your marriage. And a lot of people started spinning out of the parish and going to other jurisdictions. And a couple of people actually went to the GOCK. And I stayed in contact with those people, and they were really driving the point home to me that, what's happening is improper and you need to get your marriage crowned and solidified in the church. which made sense to me. And I reached out to Metropolitan Demetrius in an email, and I asked him, if I came into the GOCK today, how would you receive me as someone who has not been crowned, but lives a married life and was married in the secular world? And I think that I was subconsciously looking for a gotcha to paint him as like a fanatic extremist. And he wrote back a very gracious and kind email and said that by no means would we receive you as fornicators. We would receive you as a married couple, and then we would immediately crown you. And I think that was a turning point for us, because one, a bishop actually wrote back to us in a timely manner, and he was just very gracious and kind.
Yeah,
which is not something that we had known from the bishops of the ROCOR-MP.
Yeah, there's very few of those left. Most of the time, you'll never see them ever. So
yeah, and that ties into that clericalism thing. Bishops would come for a visit. I can remember being told explicitly, we've got to have this amount of money ready to hand the bishop when he comes. The bishop arrives. He sits at the elevated table. The booze flows, fancy food. I can remember being chastised by priests. Don't bother the bishop. Don't try to speak to him. He doesn't want to hear anything you have to say. I can remember other parish priests in the ROCOR telling me that you should never speak to a bishop if you have a problem in the church.
Yeah, that's not good.
Yeah, just blind clericalism. And that was difficult, because at that time we're reading the lives of the saints. We're reading testimonies from people in the old ROCOR, and they're talking about how you would walk into the cathedral in San Francisco and you might find a bishop having a snack in his rasa down in the kitchen. And that was just inconceivable to us in the modern day ROCOR. Would never occur.
Yeah, when I was in ROCOR-MP, all the years I was there, I'd met the first hierarch, just maybe a handful of times. Yeah, Metropolitan Nicholas I met once, and we had forced his hand to actually come down. But yeah, so they're not. And the East Coast ones are better than some of the other ones. The other ones just don't ever show up, no matter what. So the sky could come crashing down; they'll never show up. Yes, so it's interesting. Did you find that was there like any of the ecclesiological things, that the barriers that had been broken when you were reading through these like St. Philaret texts, or like any of that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that the ecclesiological hump was probably less for us than other people to overcome, because we had already built that mindset somewhat before we were ever Orthodox, and then we continued to build it as Orthodox people, even if we were nominally Orthodox. But when you read the things that St. Philaret wrote, and Bishop Grabe and Bishop Averki, all these people in the ROCOR, there is no doubt about how the ecclesiology of the church works. Yeah. I mean, they leave no gray area. And that was also confusing. So, in the ROCOR, it was very common to hear disparaging comments about the OCA or the GOARCH and how you should never go there. But then we would be in communion with other synods who were in turn in communion with the Ecumenical Patriarchate. And I would ask bishops and priests, how can this be, right? They're so horrible. We're in schism. And I think there was always a subtext that there was like a doctrinal defect that drove those separations. And when you dig around and really look at it, it's usually some real estate transaction that has soured, or at some point money is the root of it. But again, at some point, I guess to sum it all up, I had to ask myself, how is it that I can be in this church who bends over backwards to appease formally declared heretics? Our bishops in Russia, they pray with Nestorians, they pray with Assyrians, they pray with Monophysites, and this is not like praying with a Presbyterian, right? there's even less gray area here. These are formally declared heretics. So they're
Yep.
outside of the church. And yet we have these old calendarists 50 miles away, and they're the devil.
Mm-hmm.
They're graceless schismatics. We wouldn't even look at them. In fact, there are synodal documents in the ROCOR-MP that forbid laymen and clerics from even speaking with people in the old calendarist church. And I just couldn't make sense of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So did you know? So you didn't seem to buy into that whole resist within movement. You knew what was going on in Moscow, and you knew it was a problem already. Seems like.
I think a lot of that resist within movement, as an observer, it just created more friction than it solved.
Mm-hmm.
So the rebaptism controversies that have weathered the official church lately. In our parish, in one of our parishes, the priest was performing corrective baptisms on Greeks from GOARCH secretly. So, and I asked him, why would it be better for us to, starting from the beginning? So the people in GOARCH are Orthodox, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So how can we incite other Orthodox Christians to disobey their bishop? Right? Wouldn't the right thing to do be to get them to approach their bishop and demand a corrective baptism? And the canons are very clear about clerics not dealing in deceit in the affairs of the church. And so what seems like a well-intentioned effort to regularize people's, their salvation,
Mm-hmm.
what it actually does is it creates like this anti-canonical impulse in the church. Because if they're Orthodox, then I can't in good conscience urge them to disobey their bishop and perform secret acts against their will. Does that make sense?
It does, and there's that whole controversy. It's that particular topic is interesting because a lot of ROCOR, like Bishop Luke said a number of years ago, we were at that Uncut Mountain press conference in 2002. He said, at Jordanville, we do corrective baptisms for the canonical reason that we're allowed to do them, according to Metropolitan Hilarion and Bishop Laris was his quote. And the reason they're doing that is because in the ROCOR-MP, why they're doing that is because the Greeks and the OCA and the Antiochians, so you came from Anglicanism, they will not baptize you. If you're Antiochian, OCA, it doesn't matter. You're getting chrismated. I have a old friend of mine. He's actually he's a hieromonk. He told me a story of the OCA where he had a friend of his that came from Egyptian paganism, was never baptized whatsoever, no from any sort of denomination in Christianity, and they refused to baptize him, chrismated him. So there's it's wild.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is that the very fact that they had to cloak it in secrecy,
Mm-hmm.
to me, revealed how powerless the traditionalists inside of the church really are. Because if we were resisting within, then we would be mobilizing those people to go to their bishops and change their circumstance. And instead, because we're so unicized and powerless, we do it under the cloak of darkness and secrecy.
Mm-hmm. That's accurate because their bishops are not interested in being Orthodox.
Right. So the battle's already been lost.
Yeah. Yeah. I fell for that. I fell for that too. The whole resist within. You get gaslighted as you're leaving the struggle. You're going to become irrelevant. Well, ever since I left, I think I've become more relevant now and caused more heartache and heartburn for people than I ever was when I was in ROCOR-MP. So that's
and you see it. It's once you see it everywhere. It's like the glasses from They Live.
Yeah.
Like that. The latest synodal statement about the things that are happening in Russia. They don't even have the teeth to say communism, right?
No.
They use a euphemism. They say dangerous 20th century ideologies or something.
I didn't think about that until you mentioned it, but that's what they say. Yeah.
Yeah, they're completely neutered. They can't even name the demonic force that they claim to stand against.
Yeah.
Because it would cause too much of a rift in the former Soviet Union.
Mm-hmm. That it's at some point people. I wonder because the ROCOR had an 80-year witness of anti-Moscow Patriarchate, anti-Sergius, Patriarch Sergius. I'm speaking of. They're on the cusp of canonizing this person as a saint of the church, and I'm wondering what ROCOR is going to do about that. That's going to be interesting when they do
Yeah,
that.
I actually got a chance to ask Father Deacon Sarev about that in person, and
He's all about that.
well, yeah, I said it seems like they're going to canonize Sergius pretty soon,
Mm-hmm.
and he said I don't doubt that they will. And my question was, how will you teach at Jordanville when we have all of our modern saints who are, I mean, there's no gray area again. Sergius of sorry memory. He is a traitor. He is an agent of the devil. And he said, well, we will respect their decision, but we won't agree with it. And that, again, it's just we've returned to this pragmatic church. This is the pragmatism of Vatican II in Orthodoxy.
That's actually when you actually process that, think about that for a second. That's mind blowing. It's like,
yeah,
where's the unity in doctrine? Where's the unity in faith? It's like, oh, they're doing that over there. We'll do our own thing.
But I think the biggest thing for us ecclesiologically was probably studying the UCOs and how the Russian church in exile came to be. So when you read all their correspondences, it's very clear that the Russian synod abroad, they saw that UCOs as a grace-fulfilling document, right? That document bestows canonicity upon the church.
Mm-hmm.
And we were hearing from all the modernists in the ROCOR-MP that canonicity is granted through allegiance or submission to one of the apostolic sees,
Mm-hmm.
right? And for me to accept that, I would have to undermine the entire theological tradition of the church abroad that recognized that UCOs as canonical.
Mm-hmm.
And what that would mean logically is that the ROCOR was in schism, like the OCA claimed, and the Metropolia said they were in schism for many, many years.
Yep.
And here's the problem with that, is that if I would agree with the Russian subtext that the ROCOR, the church abroad, was in schism, that would mean that St. John Maximovich was in schism. It would mean that St. Philaret was in schism. It would mean that St. Seraphim Rose, all of these people who I pray to, who I have no doubt are with me in this cloud of witnesses at all times, that they all died in schism.
Mm-hmm.
And a synod might be able to mend a schism in real time, but they can't reach back through space and time and imbue grace on people who died without it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You can't retroactively add grace. And that seems to be sort of the argument. It's in the mix there.
Yeah, that's actually was written in an article. There was a Greek bishop, I forgot his name, but he said that about St. John, that, he died. He was a schismatic in life and he died as a schismatic in death, but they recognize him as a saint now. I'm like, I don't know. I don't think it works like that.
I could never even bring myself to say or entertain such a thing about St. John.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
It's also interesting. I don't know if just within the last few hours, I saw a post that this is going into that tangential stuff, is that the OCA is now going to canonize. They're looking to canonize some of their bishops that died in the 60s in the OCA. That's going to be a problem for the Russian church abroad because these people died in schism from ROCOR back in the 60s. Metropolitan Philaret was calling them the graceless Soviet autocephalites, and
right,
they were 100% schismatic from the ROCOR. So now you're going to have now those two are in communion, so you're going to have ROCOR recognizing bishops that died in schism from themselves. That's going to be an interesting.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
Yeah.
And then we had visited a lot of patriarchal parishes, and what we found there was that their church life was completely divorced from ROCOR.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, the laity weren't even aware of hierarchical visits from ROCOR that were occurring in the same city on the same day.
Yeah.
Didn't even know who those hierarchs were.
Yeah.
And that really threw us for a loop, because in theory, we're all part of the same synod.
Yeah.
And yet completely parallel and different traditions too. The parish life was very far apart.
Yeah, the Moscow Patriarchate is something else. It's not, the two lives do not mix.
No, it's a totally distinct cultural entity.
Yeah.
And meeting some of the priests who are in the patriarchal parishes, especially the American ones, they have lived a completely different, separate life from the people who were in the old ROCOR. So you talk to those people, and some of them came into the Metropolia in the 70s, but had been with the Muscovite Church since the 50s in America. And so you realize in that moment, I'm actually talking to someone who, for many decades, took an adversarial position to our saints. And now somehow we've,
united.
We've overcome the impasse, but not through any meaningful dialogue.
It's similar to what happened with the glorification of the catacomb saints. Is Saint Philaret in 1981 canonized all those new martyrs to include Saint Joseph of Petrograd, who's in Moscow is recognized as schismatic heretic to this very day. So, and also, as of 2012, the Moscow Patriarchate decanonized Saint Basil of Kaneshma. They decanonized him in 2012. They did it in secret. They took him off the calendar. But here in DC, on the back wall of the church, you have a huge icon of St. Basil of Kaneshma. So how's that going to work? So how does that work? Because we have the ROCOR here in DC in the cathedral doing the services to these two saints who are considered schismatics and heretics according to their patriarchate, who they're commemorating in that same very liturgy. It's a cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, and then this is just my personal opinion, but in the ROCOR-MP, especially where homiletical content is concerned, we just didn't really hear about Jesus Christ all that much. And coming into the GOCK, completely different. We feel like this missing piece has been put back in us. And we go back to the old saints of ROCOR. There is no doubt that they loved their motherland. They loved Russia. They loved their culture. But the thing that they lived for and the thing that occupied the center of their mind's eye was Jesus Christ. Yep. That was the engine that drove them. And I think that ROCOR-MP, to some degree, has replaced that with a sort of reactionaryism against Protestantism, because a lot of people who convert come from evangelical backgrounds, and they've kind of got like this icky feeling. So they want to cast off all of that Jesus talk. And then in lieu of building the inner life that Orthodoxy requires of you, you get to kind of fetishize and exoticize Russian things. And so you go to an MP parish and you might see American people wearing Russian folk costume, or learning Russian from a pocket thesaurus.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that I'm Russophobic or Russophilic. I don't really have I don't care. But that just felt like sort of a replacement. That was like Indiana Jones switching the sandbag. Jesus Christ out, Russian things in.
Yeah, there's a lot of places. There's a lot of Russian ROCOR churches that are very Russian to this day. So that's how it's going to be. Yeah. So when you finally left the ROCOR-MP and you went and you crawled you saw the basement of the GOC church, and you saw Father John there with his hood and his, the dripping, the dripping of evil and
blood everywhere.
Yeah. What was your? Because I had that apprehensiveness when I came over. I was like, I've been in ROCOR for years now, and I wanted to do the fight within, and I was like, still apprehensive, but I was kind of nervous, and because I didn't know what to expect. And then for me, when I got into the GOC, I remember Metropolitan Demetrius. He walked up to me and he gave me like a Matani almost, and I was like, this bishop, Metropolitan Demetrius, is something else. He's a very he's a very authentic bishop. He's not, and I say that, like I say this constantly. People will talk to me. It's like our bishops are thin. They live in monasteries. They're not like 300-400 pounds. They're very monastic. And when I started interacting with all the priests and the bishops, most especially the bishops, I was constantly thinking to myself, I've been reading all these ROCOR texts for years, all these old ROCOR bishops, and I felt like I was in the text and the letters that I was reading. That's how I felt when I was here. I felt like I was going back into a time capsule.
Yeah. So, like, again, this is just my feeling, and I'm going to try not to be too uncharitable, but the ROCOR bishops, you get the sense that they live a luxuriant life. And that's something that happens in Moscow. Those bishops live like rock stars. They drive around in Bentleys. They have yachts and villas and Rolexes. And, that's a whole nother world there. But in America, you really get the feeling that up at the Synod building, they're just kind of sitting around eating Russian tea cakes. And they visit the parish and they're guzzling liquor and everyone's toasting them. Coming into the GOCK, we met Metropolitan Demetrius the first time we attended liturgy. Mm. And it's funny that you say that, because the first thing that struck me was his very almost fragile physique. He's very thin. And he had a small plate with a very sparse and very monastic assortment of foods. And I think it was the first time I've seen a bishop living in public like that. And if I didn't know that he was a bishop, I probably wouldn't have guessed. Mm-hmm. He's just an unassuming figure sitting at a table with his rasa and a very simple wooden hiking stick almost. And I told Father John, I'd like to talk to Metropolitan Demetrius if it's possible. And he went over to Metropolitan, he whispered in his ear, and the Metropolitan shooed away all the deacons and priests around him and said, come sit. Mm-hmm. And I've never had an experience like that with a hierarch. And we sat there for maybe half an hour, and you could just feel that this was a very kind and generous person. Someone who was really living the faith. He didn't give me any ultimatums or harsh words. Very, very understanding and very lenient. And then Father John is very learned and polished, and again, very gentle and meek. Mm-hmm. And that is a departure from what we've known in the ROCOR-MP, where I think the popular thing is to affect like a very hyper masculine, almost barking presence as a priest.
Yeah, like it's like you want to go to the gym and slam weights on the ground and stuff, or climb up on top of a church with those tablets. Someone in mind.
Yeah, so like all that stuff in ROCOR is very popular right now. Guns and weightlifting and it's funny because I like all those things.
Yeah.
But I feel like even those things that I like, they're an impediment to my salvation. Mm-hmm. Because I like them, right?
Yeah.
I don't want the church to reach out with their blessing hand and sanctify those things for me.
Yeah.
I want to transcend those things.
It's a good way to look at it, because I do that. Like, I've been weightlifting. People can't tell because I sit in all my interviews. I sit. So, but I've been lifting for 14 years. So it's like when I was in the military and when I was in law enforcement, I've been lifting for my whole life. But I don't go posting it, slamming deadlifts in a cassock on YouTube or whatever. It's not.
Yeah, it begs the question: where does like good stewardship of your body end and vanity begin? Mm-hmm. And I would argue that vanity begins when you start posting selfies on Instagram holding up weight racks.
Yeah. I'm not trying to be a Timu Mr. Beast over here. That's not my thing.
Yeah, I just can't take a priest seriously who behaves like this.
Yeah. So. Yeah, that's an introduction to Metropolitan. So what's spiritual life been like in the GOC now that you're there? You're obviously now you because people they were telling you before you went in there, it's just 5 people in Florida in a basement and obviously, for those who don't know, St. Philaret's is one of our most thriving parishes. So many people there cramped into this fairly large church, I'd say now.
Yeah, and we're building a new parish or a new building.
That building is going to be beautiful when it's done.
Yeah, it's designed by. Well, I don't know if I should say it was designed by. Anyway, it's beautiful.
Style church, but it's bricks, not stones. Stones.
Yeah, it's a stone. It's like a replica of an early Byzantine temple.
Yeah,
it's a fantastic building.
Yeah, so tell us about parish life. How's that?
So, geographically, it's kind of analogous to being in the ROCOR-MP where we live. We would have to drive a pretty good distance to go to a cathedral. I think the plus side is that everything is so geographically similar that our pilgrimages look almost the same. So whereas we might go to Nyack, New York before, now we just drive a little farther to the west and visit St. John's Monastery in, what is it, Cobleskill?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cobleskill, yeah. Parish life is... I think after the third time my wife and I went, we talked about how the scripture where Christ tells us about how his yoke is gentle, or his yoke is light and his burden is gentle and easy. We just kept revisiting that every time we visited St. Philaret's. Mm-hmm. In ROCOR, there was a sort of an oppressive presence that we felt in our parish life. Mm-hmm. I don't know if it was a conformist drive or just the clerical milieu of ROCOR. Mm-hmm. But parish life at St. Philaret's feels light and it feels unfettered and easy. Even though we drive a little bit farther to get there, it just feels easier. It's hard to explain. Does that make any sense?
It does, yeah. It's not... I still have, Father John is, like you said, he's a very, I don't know how to describe Father John. It's the best words for him. He's a very gentle, kind person that he's not like me. That's for sure. Like I was in the Marine Corps for years. I was in law enforcement for years. So I got that rough and like mean personality. And that's just something it's kind of ingrained, but he doesn't have that. He's very a gentle, meek person that was, when he invited me down there to speak, and they were just, I wish I lived closer to there. That's why I would go down there all the time. Yeah, they were a great parish.
I don't know what to say about Father John, except to say that it's very obvious that he has a rich inner life.
Yeah.
That it's not something that you can read your way to, or it's an otherworldly aspect.
Yeah, that's one thing I'd like. It brings me to the point is because, like you were saying earlier when we were talking, is people have this idea about the GOC. When they think of the GOC, a lot of times, unfortunately, they think of my polemics and my articles and how harsh I am and just the blunt, hitting people over the head with the facts of history. It's like your bishops are in the WCC, your bishops are heretics, and they think that. But when you get to these parishes, we don't really talk about that stuff too much.
No,
the younger kids do.
And that's been the most refreshing thing. So in ROCOR-MP, you would hear a homily almost every week about ecumenism and Freemasons and Zionists or whoever the enemy of the day was. Mm-hmm. That was always really frustrating for us because we felt like in Orthodoxy, that's kind of the subtext, right? Yeah. Those are conclusions necessitated by the imperative. We don't really need to talk about all that stuff every day. Mm-hmm. But I think that it's a coping mechanism because they're so neutered and so encircled by the things that they claim to oppose that they've been forced into this reactionary posture. Yeah. And in the GOCK, they haven't joined themselves to any of those things, and they're relatively unbothered by them. Yeah. So the homilies are about, guess who? Jesus Christ, right? It's all about God. And I can't help but feel like I wasted some time. I know that's a spiritual delusion that I need to fight, but I feel very much like this is the Orthodox Church that I was seeking, and I finally walked into it.
Yeah, I think that is definitely what I experienced myself. I mean, I'm in a different world because I've been charged with doing the research, doing the history, continuing the polemics, and like exposing this stuff. I mean, so when people see my work, they're like, "Oh, see, that's the GOC. All they talk about is this," and they're just heresy hunters. I'm like, "Well, no, I'm the only one actually." So let's give the other priests. I mean, the other priests they talk about, especially when we have a convert coming in, they'll explain, why we're not in communion with these people, why we are different, why we're not in the WCC, why we're not, all that stuff. We'll talk about that, but it's continually, like when I was in ROCOR-MP, like you were saying, or when I was with Orthodox ethos, that was our whole life. It was like ecumenism. It gets old even for me, even though I have to write about it every day, but that's my job. So, but yeah, at the parish life, at the parish level, we don't, I'd say, because I go to a predominantly Greek parish, mostly Greeks. They know what ecumenism. They know what ecumenism is. They know it's bad. They know we don't go to New Calendar's churches. They know we're not in communion with these people, and they know why. And then they carry about their life. They carry about with their spiritual life, and they're in, especially at my parish, because they all live around the parish. They're in liturgy 3, 4, 5 times a week. They're at vigil. They're at vigil for 4 or 5 hours on a Saturday, and they're on Sunday. And they're constantly in the services, and now all that stuff is like tertiary. It's not even a thought in their minds.
Yeah, I think it's really dangerous to get people to believe that they're somehow engaged in a personal conflict with like the World Council of Churches or Bill Gates or insert whatever unapproachable New World Order force here. That's a delusion. If I'm walking around all day believing that I am somehow engaged with those entities, that's not real, right? I'm engaged with the devil and my flesh and my passions, and those are the things that are here with me. I fight them here. Those other things, that's a waste of time.
Yeah, we do need to do, which for those that are in the new calendar and all that stuff, it's like those things what the problem with those is they are spiritually harmful. They are going to drip down into your local life, just like they've taken over. They're not, to say that they're not nothing, but they will drip into your spiritual life. They are important. That you.
Well, that's what I mean. That's what I mean, right? The devil, he convinces you he doesn't exist, and that's how he does it. He does it by substitution. Yeah. You don't need to fight your passions. You got to fight the New World Order and Bill Gates and whoever the boogeyman is.
Yeah, that stuff you can't change, but the things you can change, like St. Paul says, if they don't teach what was been given to us, depart from them. It goes back to the scriptures. It's simple. You can't be in communion with a heretic. It's as simple as that. You can't be in communion with a heretic, and that's why we do the work that we do. Is we're constantly bringing these issues up, is because we want people to leave and not be spiritually tainted or contaminated by the heresies. And then once they get into the church, they can leave all that behind and live an Orthodox life, and they're not going to be constantly absorbed with ecumenism and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, to people who are leaning this direction, I would say most of the things that you're being told about the Old Calendar Church are just blatantly false.
Yeah.
One of the things that we were always told is that the Old Calendar is this kind of consortium of warring synods, and they all hate each other and they're all anathematizing each other. The truth is, now that we have found this out, most of these synods have merged into one canonical body. And even most of the synods that are separated for whatever reason, there's a brotherly warmth between them and us.
For the most part.
In most instances.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some outliers. You will make some trade-offs. So in America, there will be less big golden cathedrals and I think people need to get in the mindset of recognizing that those things are not the church, right? That doesn't lend any legitimacy to your synod that they own a big gold draped cathedral.
Yeah, I mean, if we look in Moscow, they got some of the nicest cathedrals, and inside them they have iconography and mosaics of Stalin, Lenin, iron sickles, tanks, World War II soldiers with Soviet soldiers with guns.
Yeah, it's worth less than nothing.
Yeah, it's not. That's something else. Yeah, but that's one of the things I wanted people to come away with, is because there's people like out there like Jay Dyer who straight up lied on YouTube, said, "Oh, old calendars are just 5 people in a church in Florida that live in they worship in a trailer." I'm like, come on, man.
No, I'm afraid not.
Yeah, it's that's a good distinction to make. Like what I do online is polemics in the actual church, because people don't see, they hear that like ROCOR hears, or the new calendars here. Oh, they're just like there's blood dripping from their mouths. These zealots, that's all they talk about, and they're crazy and psychotic. And it's like, no, actually, 99% of GOC people are just normal people. They have families, children, jobs. They don't really pay attention to ecumenism. They know that El Pilaforos is a heretic. They know that all the patriarchal synods are in heresy, and that they're in the World Council of Churches. And then that's why we're not in communion with them, and we cannot be in communion with them. And then we go about and live our Orthodox life. I'd say that's
it's very simple.
Yeah, I think that's how when I got the impression, because I had never been to St. Philaret's, I don't think the only people that we actually talked about these issues with was the subdeacon Paul, and then I brought the subject up because I was interviewing people about old ROCOR stuff. But
subdeacon Paul is the godfather of my children. He and his wife are their godparents, and we kind of weathered this whole thing with them in tandem. So we have a really tight bond with them. And he was actually, I think he was baptized in the GOC as a child, and then and then took a very circuitous path back into the GOC.
Yeah, but, every Sunday I just see. It's funny because I think about this stuff all the time, because I'm constantly I'm online. You see when I'm publishing, I'm constantly doing research and writing and publishing and fighting and doing. That's like my job. That's just my responsibility that I've been tasked with. But on Sunday, it's like, we do liturgy and the priest is prayerful, and I don't have to, like when I was at ROCOR-MP down in Virginia with Metropolitan Jonah, I had, oh, look, you don't have to be Orthodox to be saved. Oh, Monophysites have, they have sacraments too, all that stuff. And here I'm just like, I don't have to worry about the priest teaching heresy. And then after that, I teach a catechism class on Sundays, the history of resistance. And then I watch the kids run around, play soccer and hockey, and like fight each other with like swords.
Yeah.
It's like normal, just normal life.
Yeah, it's normal.
Yeah. So most people don't see that. And that's why I wanted to interview you, just so you can because there's a lot of people, I get a lot of messages that people are, even clergy. We have, we've had, how many? We've had, I think a priest so far. A priest has come over from ROCOR-MP. There's another one on the way. We've had multiple subdeacons from ROCOR-MP come over. I think a few readers. So it's ROCOR-MP. They're coming over to us, and I just want them specifically to know that we're just normal parishes.
Yeah, no, like strikingly normal, beautifully normal families, just a normal parish. I don't know what else I could say other than that. And in ROCOR-MP, it felt very not normal. Jay Dyer is a good example. I think ROCOR has gobbled up or placed themselves adjacent to all of these alt-right and pseudo-fascist right-wing, whatever they can do to gain traction. And I don't know what the attrition rate looks like from that practice, but I would imagine it's pretty high.
Yeah, it's kind of just like they're trying to make like online edgelording like Orthodoxy. Seems
Yeah,
like.
yeah. Anyone that could be a fellow traveler. It's like a big tent orthodoxy. It's
Mhm.
very Protestant.
Yeah.
And in ROCOR, I can remember people coming to our parish wearing like SS uniforms, and the priest refusing to tell them to take it off, or people
That's
being
wild.
like, yeah, just crazy stuff like that.
Yeah, that's wild. But yeah, so for all those that are wondering, we're just what the GOC is like. It's like it's a parish where you know your bishop's not a heretic. You're not in communion with heretics. You don't have to worry about your priest preaching heresy. You don't have to worry about waking up to an article from Orthodox traditionalists. Oh, look, your bishop was praying in a Hindu temple. You don't have to worry about that stuff, and you're gonna grow more spiritual in the Orthodox faith, and you're gonna live what all these saints taught. You're gonna live what the scriptures taught.
Well, and
So
also you're going to meet and live with and pray with all these people who actually they received their spiritual formation from these saints in ROCOR. So if
mhm.
you're over in the ROCOR-MP and you're reading all these saints, this is where most of their spiritual children are
Yeah,
here. And that's been the case, I think, for pretty much every cleric that we've met so far was with Metropolitan Vitali or with Seraphim Rose, or
yeah,
someone that has a great spiritual imprint upon us and means a lot to us. They actually lived with those people.
yeah. Yeah, I just had the thought flash in my mind. We've had, Father Stephen Allen, or
Mm-hmm.
he was ordained by Bishop Gregory Grabe. His ordination story was awesome. Father Andrew Kensis, he was ordained by Saint Vitaly Ustinov. Father Thomas Moretta was ordained by Saint Philaret. The priest in Oklahoma, he was ordained by Archbishop Alippi, who was an amazing bishop. I think, yeah, a lot of us, they were all ordained because all our priests are older and they all lived through that old time. They're all ordained by old ROCOR bishops, or they live like Father Andrew Kansas lived with Saint Seraphim Rose, and
Yeah.
he was.
So these guys are over here. They're holding the deposit of faith. I mean, they were actually handed it. It was handed to them by living saints. And I just can't stress how palpable that is in the GOC.
Yeah,
I mean, you can really feel that.
it does. Yeah, when you meet, because I think most people they don't actually know a GOC person. Actually, they don't.
Yeah.
They see me, or they'll see you. They'll see the online people. They'll look at like Father Joseph Swaden's ministry and like what I do, and it's like the constant polemics, and they think that's just the church that we have, and it's like no, we're online here ringing the cowbells. I mean, wake up, people, wake up and come to the church and to
Yeah,
live.
I think a lot of people have that takeaway that the GOC is something that exists online in the ether. Certainly not the case.
Yeah.
This
Well.
is very real on the ground.
Yeah.
This, in my view, this is the church.
Yeah, and we have, what's funny is like we have a seminary. We have a thriving seminary out in Etna, and for those who are interested in that, they can go back and watch my interview with the Archbishop or Bishop Auxentios, who knew Father Seraphim, and they were involved in that whole patina time, and went to his funeral, so all that. So those that have a affinity for Saint Seraphim, who we canonized in the Metropolitan Agafongo in the ROCOR-A, and he canonized him. So if you want to be in a church that will celebrate Saint Seraphim service, come over here.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, right.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, you don't have to leave the halo off of Saint Seraphim Rose's icon over here for us.
That's right. That's
So,
right.
but I'm glad I was able to meet with you and we were able to talk, and you can explain that what the GOC actually is in real time on the ground, where it's not just some online church in the ether. It's a good point.
Yeah, I think people need to start questioning what it is that keeps them in the official church. What is this thing that is retaining you there? I woke up today and I read that Patriarch Kirill released a statement yesterday morning that those who kill in the war in Ukraine do not transgress against the commandment, thou shalt not kill. And he went on to say that they can't do so because of the church's just war theology. Well, the Orthodox Church has never embraced just war theology. And the canons are very clear. We have penances for people who kill in war. You're excommuned for a number of years. I want people to start reading and thinking about these things and asking themselves, what am I really in allegiance with here?
Yeah. And that's not even getting into the whole what Russia uses ROCOR for, has used them for in the past, and what they're using them for now. For those that are interested in that topic of the whole, like, you might have seen that article in the Hill, or that text from Congressman Joe Wilson, and the subsequent thrashing and crying from Father John Whiteford. We have a whole book publishing soon about it's a republishing from a former KGB agent who defected to the United States, and he gave a whole detailed expose about that whole subject. So that's coming out soon. So that we're going to blow the lid off that topic as well.
Nice.
So,
well, anyway, final thought. St. Paul tells us that we can act miraculously, we can prophesy, etc. But if we don't have love, we've got nothing, right? We become a sounding brass, a clanging cymbal. Look around and ask yourself, is this love? Is there love here? Because we've come into the GOCK and we feel like we've found that. This is where the love of Christ is present, and we can feel it and we can live in it with other people. Yeah, glory to God. And we had not felt that before.
That's, well, I'll leave that as a final note, and I appreciate it for you. Thanks for you for coming on and telling us your story. It's going to be, hopefully, it's God willing, it's helpful to people. If you have any questions, if you want to reach out, you know you can go to my website, orthodoxtraditionalist.com, and click the contact us, and you can fill out the contact, and I'll get you in touch with a priest. Wherever you're at, we'll do our best to get you in contact with the priest or the bishop. So, Evan, I appreciate it, and thanks again.
Yeah, thanks, Deacon. See you soon.
Yeah.